welcome to ThinkTech. My name is Mike Dewert. The title of this segment is For the Benefit of Humankind, because when I was a science student, I was taught that science and technology are to be pursued for the benefit of humankind. My topic today is on agriculture and pesticides in particular, and the title is Pesticides, Precautionary Principles, and then we'll have a little bit on natural gas as well. And we'll discuss how the precautionary principle applies to just about everything we're doing. So I'm talking to Jay today, and just want to start by saying about 10 days ago, a week ago Wednesday, the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party, in which I'm one of the executives.
You and Juanita.
Me and Juanita.
Yeah.
Yeah, we sponsored a forum on pesticide use in Hawaii.
Did you support pesticide use?
Well, I do, but you got to define pesticide.
Okay.
It turns out that pesticides can be just about anything. Vinegar can be a pesticide if you use it that way. Bleach is a pesticide. The chlorine in our water is a pesticide. They're everywhere. And there's classes of pesticides. There's the general use pesticides you just go buy, like bleach or the ant baits at Home Depot.
Yeah.
Then there's the ones that require a license, the more regulated pesticides.
Why do they require a license?
Well, they're more dangerous, more toxic.
Dangerous to people.
To people or to the environment.
To humankind.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So what we had at this forum was we had Gary Hooser from Kauai, and of course Kauai just passed this law regulating pesticides and requiring disclosure of what pesticides.
He's a pretty heavy environmentalist.
He's a very strong environmentalist.
He was the guy that opposed the super ferry. He was the guy that led the charge on the GMOs.
Yes.
We know which side of the equation he lives on.
Well, you know, he's expressing some concerns that the community has, and whether we think the concerns are fully scientific or not, they're concerns. And it's up to them.
That's the fact.
Right.
You know, accurate, true, doesn't matter.
Right. You've got to address them to move on, you know, politically.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, so I agree with you that some of the concerns may be overblown, but we've got to figure out how to address them and move on, so we can have food, have clean water, etc.
Yeah.
So in addition to Gary Hooser, we had Gary Gill, who's in charge of Department of Health, and then we had the guy who's in charge of the pesticides branch of the Department of Agriculture, whose name escapes me right now, even though I jotted it down so it wouldn't escape me.
That sounds like a pretty good program.
It was a pretty good program. I've got his name right here. Let's see, Pesticides Branch, Tom Matsuda. And Tom Matsuda just had a wealth of information for us. He gave a very good talk on pesticides. In general tutorial for the public, he says, the problem with pesticides in Hawaii isn't just the big ag companies, because we're watching them. It's everybody else. The golf courses, your homeowners, people are throwing pesticides, weed killers and stuff on their lawns and sidewalks and driveways. And he made a good point. He says, you got to remember that the label is the law. He made us all put up our hands and swear it. We'd always read the labels on the pesticides. The label is the law. And whoever reads everything on the pesticide label.
I mean, remember the label on the pillows?
No, do not remove
under penalty of law. I was so afraid to do that. Yeah. One day I felt very rambunctious, and I pulled that thing off, and nobody came to arrest me.
Nobody came to arrest you. Yeah. Yes. Yes, that's because it doesn't apply to the end user. Although now they're going to put those RFID tags in them, and the NSA is going to track you and you rip those labels off. Yeah. No,
this is very relevant. We're talking about the pesticide conference, or conference is the right name for it?
It was a forum.
Yeah. Well, because on the 23rd of April, we're doing this thing, the New Tech in Agriculture, and we're partnering with the Department of Agriculture. And the hint is the New Tech in Agriculture is in aquaponics.
Sure.
That's where it lives. I mean, it's very sophisticated. It's also very productive and very delicate. And you've got to use all the tech you can find to make it work. But if you can make it work, it generates a lot of food with very little, very little input.
Right.
And just all you need really is a place for it,
right?
Which is not a big place, and feed for the fish.
Yeah.
And they have feed now that is half the feed that was required earlier. So result is that you can do aquaponics with very little input.
Yeah, yeah, that's because it used to be you would have to catch a lot of fish, make it into fish meal and feed your fish, but now they can do plant-based proteins and other things mixed with the fish protein.
And this changes the whole system, ecosystem, and makes it easy. You know, in the future, you know, I mean, I haven't wrapped my mind around this, but in the future, agriculture is going to be aquaponics.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen. It's so much more efficient, and you can develop protein without hurting the environment, you know, without hurting anything, really. So I'm thinking, you know, that maybe pesticides, as you discussed in the forum, is also, you know, a new tech that ought to be considered in that. I know, you know, it's been linked up to GMOs, and I guess that's, you know, to me, I thought, you can tell me different, that the whole shebang about pesticides, which we've been using for years and years, was just another way to attack GMOs. Make GMOs look bad. You know, if you didn't have enough ammunition from all the other arguments, you can trot this one out and then make them look bad because they use pesticides in their testing. But I'm not sure there's a lot of new technology in pesticides. I think GMOs are, that's my phone. I think GMOs are, you know, GMOs ultimately are the pesticides. In other words, you resist pests with sturdier crops.
You know? Sturdier crops. Like, for example, there's a BT cotton. BT is Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a naturally occurring bacterium that produces a toxin that kills certain kinds of pests. And you can put it in cotton, and the cotton will be resistant to the cotton bollworm and other things. It's not approved for use in food crops. You can't put BT into soybeans that are going to be consumed by humans, or corn that's going to be consumed by humans, or anything like that. But so you have a GMO plant that's a pesticide. The other major form of use of pesticides is these pesticide-resistant plants. The corn that's resistant to Roundup. Roundup is glyphosate's the main ingredient in it. It's used to kill weeds. If you can spray it on your fields, kill all the weeds without killing your crop, that's a benefit. You can raise more corn with fewer weeds, less work, less expensive. One of the knocks on, well, there's a few knocks on that technology. One is that because you don't kill your corn by spraying pesticides on it, there's a temptation to overuse pesticides. So to go right up to the regulatory limit. There's a regulatory limit here in Hawaii about how many pounds of pesticides per acre you can put on per year. And when you hit that limit, you're done. You can't put any more on.
So you have to pace it out.
You have to pace it out. But you may be able to get away with less. I mean, ideally, you would use as little as you needed. But if you have a crop that's not going to be harmed by the pesticide you put on, the weed killer you put on, there is a temptation to just put the max on, paced out over the year, and you know, and not actually do the hard work to calculate how much you can get away with.
How do you enforce a law like that?
Yeah, the big operators get inspected. The little farmers are a harder problem. For example, they had a case last year where they had to condemn a whole bunch of basil because the Department of Health, found that the basil had been treated with a pesticide that wasn't approved for basil. And the interesting is this was a regulated pesticide, not a general use pesticide, but one that required a license to even buy it. And the farms that actually had used it didn't have those licenses. They didn't have the license to buy it, they didn't have the training or the license to use it. So somehow either they got their hands on it illegally or they hired somebody who had it illegally, which implies that in Hawaii there's a black market for these regulated pesticides. And that's kind of a concern.
Hard laws make black markets. You know, there's only a black market if the system isn't working somehow.
Well, you can say that. On the other hand, basil, I don't want to eat pesticides in my basil. Basil's one of those crops that's hard to grow. And, you know, pesto and spaghetti and pizza and...
I remember where we met. We met at a gourmet restaurant. Do you remember that? Chef Mavro.
Chef Mavro's.
We both went there on an HPR thing.
That's right.
And there you were. Some things you don't forget.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that was an awesome event. You know, wine with every meal. Can't serve it was organic wine. You know.
Anyway, yeah. So I mean, where does it fit? Do you think? Because we'll be covering, in this program, we'll be covering agriculture in general, we'll be covering the research going on at CITAR, you know, of which there is plenty.
That'd be
I mean,
cool.
people don't give CITAR enough credit. They have a lot of high quality researchers up there. We'll be covering some of the research that's going on in the field. For example, Jana Komachi, you know, ocean fish, the Komachi fish in Kona. They're going to come down and share their research with us.
That'd be cool.
So we're going to know a lot about aquaculture, a lot about aquaponics, something about what CITAR is doing on tropical agriculture.
Right.
But I'm thinking by way of this conversation that maybe we would, and we're having GMOs too. I'll tell you, with Dennis Gonsalves. You know,
I met him.
You know, he's a fabulous guy, and he's the guy that saved papaya, which was one of our few export crops these days.
Right.
And he saved it. Now there are people who wanted to sweep him into the anti-GMO ordinances.
Right.
I don't think they succeeded.
Big Island did exempt the GMO papaya to a large extent.
Yeah.
From the law, and this is GMO in general. I can see the knock on GMO pesticides in your crops because there's a temptation to overuse the pesticides, and you just got to regulate that. The opposition to GMOs in general, I don't see as very well supported by the scientific evidence. Certainly the choice between having a GMO papaya that's resistant to a virus versus having no papayas at all, I'd rather have some papayas because as long as they've not been shown to be harmful, and they haven't been shown to be harmful. Feeding animals, feeding people, nobody gets sick from GMO papaya.
That's that's a problem. In Hawaii, we have so many unique things, and one of the unique things we have is that people connect GMOs and for that matter plants in general with culture. Right. The plant has sort of animism. Right. The plant is a living being. And thus you have to treat it differently than the way plants are treated elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, well, that's why they took the GMO kalo off the market. The University of Hawaii developed a variety of kalo based on a Taiwanese kalo cultivar that was resistant to a disease that was wiping out the kalo crop. And there was such a hue and cry over messing with this particular plant, which is very, very special to the Hawaiian culture, that they gave the patent away to a Hawaiian group and don't market it anymore, and the Hawaiian group took it off the market.
I remember that. Yeah. This is about 10 years ago. Yeah. And the university had, applied its researchers, probably through CITAR, to develop a plant patent for kalo. And it was saving kalo all over the Pacific Basin, because it's grown in a lot of places, and nobody could claim that kalo is indigenous to Hawaii. It comes from somewhere else. I think Southeast Asia, maybe, because they find
it came with the Polynesians who first came here.
Yeah.
But they have their own legends and stories about how kalo and humans were created together in their religion. The literal truth of which is not scientifically supported, but it's the cultural truth that they're trying to get across, I think.
You heard it here on ThinkTech. There's the truth and the cultural truth. Right. And they're both true in their own way.
In their own way, so culturally it's a very important plant, very important ethnobotanical plant.
Well, so here's what happened. I remember from the other side of it. So the university had a plant patent, and good for them because they were actually making money. Right. The university doesn't make money very often.
True that.
Look what they did with in vitro fertilization. It was invented here in Manoa. Now it's used everywhere in the world, and we don't get a penny for it. By Ryozo Yamagan. I'll think of it in a minute.
Well, while you're thinking about that,
take a break.
It's time to take a break. This is ThinkTech. I'm Mike Dewert. This show is for the benefit of humankind. We're talking about pesticides, precautionary principles, and maybe natural gas. And we'll be back shortly.
I'm Hong Jiang, host for Asia in Review on Tuesdays.
And I'm David Day, host for Asian Review on Thursdays. Both of us broadcast our respective shows at 4 p.m.
And my topics tend to deal with questions related to environment, culture, history, and sometimes human rights.
And my shows tend to be on international business, foreign policy, geopolitics, and national security. And you can watch our shows live on the ThinkTech website at thinktechhawaii.com.
And you can also watch us on YouTube or Olalo.
So come join us on Thursdays at 4 p.m. I'm David Day.
And on Tuesdays at 4 p.m., I'm Hong Jiang.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha. Welcome back. I'm Mike Dewert. This is ThinkTech. The name of the show is for the benefit of humankind. And we're talking about GMOs and pesticides and the precautionary principle. And Jay was just telling me about...
I remembered the name.
Yeah,
so
right.
it's Ryozu Yanagimachi. His short name was Jana Komachi. And he was in the Institute for Biogenesis. He was the one who made the green sheep up there. Did a lot of biogenics.
Right. Right.
And you can call that GMO too.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, the transgenic mice that glow.
Yes, right. The ones that glowed, right.
Right.
I mean, he made Monroe world famous for some of these things. I mean, it's great stuff. One of the things he did early on was in vitro fertilization, IVF, right, which he gave to the world. Which
a lot of people think is against their religion too.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he gave it to the world, and the world uses it today everywhere.
Yes. Benefit.
And
benefit.
Everybody's benefiting, and he's the guy that invented it, and he never got a penny over it, and university never got any royalties either, so that's just too bad.
Yeah.
The same thing with the Kalo, which the plant patent was taken out by the university, I'm guessing Sitar. They went and got a plant patent on it, and it was useful for the university because, you know, they could deliver the Kalo resistant to disease everywhere in the Pacific, basin where people, eat Kalo. I mean, that's historic all over the place. And they could make money, and then people could have a crop that would survive. And that was terrific. Yeah. But the local activists opposed that. They said Kalo is a being, and you can't do that. You can't have a patent on Kalo. And the university is interesting. The university first said, "We'll give it to you. No fight, no argument. We'll transfer the patent to you. You can have it, whatever organization, whatever Hawaiian old cultural organization involved." And what's interesting is they said, "No, you don't understand. We don't think it should be patented at all. It should be public domain." So I don't.
Well, that's very different. That means anybody can use it.
Right.
Yeah.
So what happened is, like, whether the university surrendered it into the public domain or they gave it to the organization surrendered it. It was surrendered, and now there is no plant patent for the research they did. Well, what's the net effect of that? Nobody, at least in this state, is going to do any research to improve Kalo, and Kalo probably is already a jeopardized plant, which may not survive because nobody's going to work on it to save it.
Right, and that's too bad. I mean, because we did spend a lot of public money developing that research, and the scientists that do this work, they for the most part are really wanting to benefit. They believe that they're trying to do something for the good of people.
That's the story of
Kalo
Dennis. Dennis, I mentioned his name earlier.
Oh. The guy with the papaya.
Yeah, Gonzalez.
Yes. And so it's mystifying in a lot of ways for when you do this kind of research where you try to improve a plant, improve an animal, make it more nutritious, more pest resistant. You think you're going to try to save people from starving to death. And sometimes they don't want to be saved. Right. I mean, and then you just got to deal with that, or figure out how to explain your research in a way that makes it clear that you're not being disrespectful to the culture, or you're not violating.
I think this phenomenon is specific to Hawaii. I mean, in a world market, you can't take that position. The market will roll all over you if you took that position in the world market. Right. It's only here, and the problem here is that, I mean, I'm not saying that it's always an inappropriate choice, but if you take that position, what you're doing is standing in the way of diversified agriculture, which is our only way to achieve sustainability.
I agree. I mean, so the Chinese use Kalo too, and in fact, the Italians used to use it a long time ago. I mean, there's old Roman recipes for Kalo. It was too much work once they discovered wheat and corn and stuff like that.
The Chinese had a lot of things.
But the Chinese have Kalo, and if they find it's an important crop and they want to save it, they're not going to have any qualms at all about reproducing the research. And the patent, once it was granted, was publicly available. Anybody could read the patent, and anybody reasonably skilled in the art could reproduce the work.
Well, watch out, because I think that the Chinese, we complain the Chinese took away our manufacturing sector, which is true. Right. But we
gave it away.
We gave it away.
We
watched
it
what
away.
he said here.
Right.
And you know,
It was
then we
cheaper
complained
for us to
after
let
that.
them make things.
Right.
Yeah.
Let them do it. Yeah. Who cares? We don't have the time for that.
Right.
You know, and our kids don't want to get their fingernails dirty, right? But you know what's happening? I like to just throw this in the mix. Is that before we defined manufacturing as the physical manufacture of widgets in factories, you know, such as we don't have anymore. Have you ever seen those photographs of all the dead factories in the U.S.?
Oh, yeah.
They're still standing there with the windows broken.
Right.
And years have gone by. But what the Chinese are doing now is they're doing aquaculture.
Yes.
They're manufacturing food.
Right.
They're manufacturing aquaponics.
Yep.
They're jumping way ahead of us.
Right.
You know, the amount of aquaponics food that they manufacture, aquaculture food, open ocean included, is huge, the biggest in the world.
Well, they have a huge population to feed.
So what they're doing, and what they're also exporting it, you know. You talked about tilapia from China. That's happening.
Yeah.
So you know what I find interesting is that that their definition of manufacturing now includes the manufacture of food, and we are at risk of giving it up.
Absolutely.
For reasons that are often silly.
Right.
And Hawaii needs to get straight about this. So if we don't export, or at least create enough for our own people, but better than that, export, we won't be sustainable. We'll be at the beck and call. We'll be, you know, under the on a dependent relationship with China or Asia on food, just like we have been on oil. Be back in the same place, writing checks overseas.
And we are going to continue to do that. For example, we grow rambutan here. We can't export our rambutan because we can't ensure it's pest-free.
I hate to ask you this, but qu'est-ce que c'est rambutan?
Rambutan looks like a lychee, but it's got little spiky, fuzzy things on it. It's like a fuzzy red lychee.
Okay.
And it's very, very sweet. Very, very nice fruit. I like rambutan.
Very healthy too.
Healthy. Oh, absolutely healthy. And they grow it in Thailand and Malaysia. Malaysia exports rambutan to the mainland U.S. They have the same pest problems Hawaii does, but they have a food irradiator. They're using cobalt-60 to irradiate the food as pesticide to kill the pests on it.
Do we have that?
We have a electricity-based X-ray food irradiator on Big Island for the papaya industry. We were going to build one. There was a paina
near the airport.
Near the airport that got killed.
I thought that resurrected. No,
it hasn't happened yet. The problem is people are. Well, they say, okay, it's cobalt-60, it's irradiation.
It was approved by the FDA. I mean, all the federal approvals you could ever want.
It goes to the risk-benefit. So there's no risk in every test they've done on cobalt-60 irradiated food. You don't put the metal doesn't ever touch the food, just the gamma rays. The food is safe. Now, there's certain things you don't want to irradiate, like something with high in fat, like avocado, because irradiation will break the fat chains and speed up the rate at which they become rancid. So you don't want to do that. But with something that's high in sugar and low in fat, like rambutan, it doesn't change the flavor. It's perfectly safe. Never been shown to be harmful, and it kills the pests that could wipe out other people's agricultural fields.
I remember the guy who was trying to do that. He was so frustrated.
Oh yeah.
He went through, state process for years and years and years. He had every federal approval you could want, but he couldn't get. And people, it was a protester thing.
Yeah.
They were militant because it was radiation, I guess, and they figured, they'd wind up with 10 toes or something.
11, and even the people who were opposed to it finally had to admit that there's no risk in the food. They had to fall back to, what if the cobalt-60 gets diverted somewhere and used by a terrorist? They had to fall back to those kinds of arguments.
Argument, yeah. When your first one doesn't work, then find another one.
And so it's in my view, it's not logical. It's not consistent with the science. It's not consistent with our need to provide for our people, provide income for the farmers, provide exports for Hawaii, so that we have an economy that's not just tourism, which we really do need to diversify from. And yet, it's the way it is.
You were.
And how do we educate the public is the problem.
You were going to talk about the precautionary principle in this show.
Yes, yeah.
Is this a good time to?
This is a good time to segue. And before I do that, if you ever want to know how to use a pesticide, the National Pesticide Information Center keeps the government's database of research on pesticides. It's run by Oregon State University. Phone number is the URL is npic.orst.edu. ORST is Oregon State University. So it's npic.orst.edu. You get all the information you want on any particular pesticide that you come across.
I hope you can come to our agricultural program, because I'd like to have at least a short discussion of the subject.
Okay, that'd be good. So on the precautionary principle, Gary Hooser brought this up. And Gary Hooser, of course, is a representative from Kauai. He's on the Kauai Council. He used to be in the Hawaii Senate. Used to be actually the leader of the Senate. He
ran for Congress too.
He ran for Congress too. Ran for lieutenant governor, but now he's on the Kauai County Council. He's very, very dedicated to environmental issues.
He's further away from federal and state politics than he was a few years ago. He's become an activist.
Yeah. and we need activists.
I suppose so. But he's given up his political aspirations, I think, in these other arenas in order to do that.
Yeah. And he stated the strong precautionary principle. The strong precautionary principle is if there is any risk of harm, even speculative, the person that wants to do an action has to prove that there is no harm. And that's an impossible standard to meet.
Proving a negative.
Proving that it's impossible to meet. The weak precautionary principle states that if there is a risk of harm, you may regulate the industry even if the harm is not proven yet. It doesn't require regulation, doesn't require prohibition. It says you may regulate, you may prohibit. Which is so weak it's almost meaningless. Somewhere in between.
It's like pre-crime in the Minority Report movie. If it could be, then it will be. And we will punish it for the possibility that it might be.
Right. My favorite example of where the precautionary principle should. Okay, so let me before I get into the example. So on one side you have the precautionary principle, which ranges. It's a set of principles. It ranges everything from the weak one, which is you can regulate it if there might be a risk of harm, but you don't have to. You must prohibit it if there's a risk of harm until it's proven to be safe. So, but there's a range in between. Another side is what's called a risk or cost benefit analysis, where you weigh the costs, which may be not just dollars, but intangible costs like longevity, health, cultural damage, those things, against the benefits, which may also not be dollars. They may be lives saved, they may be industry saved, there may be jobs saved, but
many possibilities.
Many possibilities. So the precautionary principle isn't inconsistent with a cost or benefit analysis. The moderate precautionary principle would entail cost-benefit analysis. But cost-benefit analysis has gotten a bad reputation in a lot of environmental circles because it can be gamed. Of course, so can the precautionary principle, but the cost-benefit analysis can be gamed by ignoring certain costs or saying, oh, they're too hard to quantify, and overstating certain benefits. But in terms of what we're talking about, the strong precautionary principle, where any cost at all is too much cost, actually makes the strong precautionary principle itself a violation of the precautionary principle. Because you wouldn't even get out of bed in the morning if you were to follow the strong precautionary principle.
Well, it stops everything.
Yeah,
I mean, at the extreme, it stops everything, and so that if you object to something, whatever it might be, then your best, for some reason unrelated to the precautionary principle, some maybe an ideological or religious, view of the matter, then you trot out the precautionary principle on damage to the environment. And everybody gets afraid, and nobody wants to do anything. And I think a lot of our state agencies, respond to that, and they stop cold in their tracks. I'll give you a short example I find interesting. Algae. Okay, we had a client that was bringing algae in from Israel. Okay, this algae already existed here. They had a very sophisticated laboratory in Tel Aviv.
They showed no pathogens and stuff in it.
Yeah. And we're bringing it in for nutraceuticals in Nelha. I thought it was really interesting that part of the process was, suppose the algae gets out. What's going to happen? And this is an algae that already lives here. But suppose the algae gets out. I mean, it could do damage. I said, well, we're going to build a concrete thing around it. We're going to make sure that it's got all these controls, physical controls, so it doesn't get out. And then the next question was, well, suppose there's a hurricane. Okay. Well, we'll build a bigger concrete thing, you know. Will you kill all the algae if you see a hurricane coming? You really want us to do that? You know, I mean,
how do we kill it?
Yeah. Well, right. How do you be sure that you killed it all? By the way, these although that ultimately in that case, you know, the permit was given for the importation of the non-GMO algae. The client, the importer, the Israeli company said, this is too much trouble.
Heck with this.
You know, it took a long time to get the permit, and because it took such a long time, they concluded, this is probably relevant to everything we're talking about, they concluded that they would run into this kind of thing in other contexts in Hawaii with Hawaii agencies, and so they didn't want any part of it. It's really funny because when, you know, I had a conversation with a client, and I said, you know, we have bureaucracy here. And he said, you think you have bureaucracy? I'll take you to Israel. We got bureaucracy. I'll show you what bureaucracy is all about, you know. And we know how to deal with it. At the end of like 2 years of waiting for this permit, he said, Jay, you're right. You got world-class bureaucracy.
World-class bureaucracy right here in Hawaii. Oh, wait, I got to be the world leader in something. So my name is Mike Dewert. This is ThinkTech for the benefit of humankind. We're talking about pesticides, the precautionary principles, and we'll be back shortly.
Hi, my name is Dr. Rafi. Every week, I'm right here at ThinkTech Hawaii, 3 p.m. on Mondays. My show is Boards' Bio Briefings. What do we do here? Well, we watch sperm swim, we see if they catch anybody, we check out the latest biosimilars, you know, the kind that, what was his name, the guy with the bicycle? I guess we forgot his name, but he was taking EPO and other human growth factors. We'll be talking about human growth factors. You want to know where to get some? Maybe I'll tell. Anyway, you can catch me, as I said, every week right here, Monday, 3 p.m., ThinkTech Hawaii, Dr. Rafi. You can also find me on Twitter, BioInfoMedical. Or you can catch me on Facebook, Dr. Rafael Boritzer. I'll be happy to converse with you. Aloha.
Aloha. Welcome back. My name is Mike Dewert. This is for the benefit of humankind on ThinkTech Hawaii. We're talking about pesticides, precautionary principles, and we may or may not get to natural gas today. So we were just talking about aquaponics a few minutes ago and pesticide use, and it turns out, of course, you will need pesticides still, even if you have aquaponics. I mean, when I was a kid, I kept tropical fish, and they would get a disease called ick, and ick is short for some long ichthy something Latin name of the organism that causes horrible fungal infection on their skin that would eventually kill the fish.
Yeah.
And the pesticide.
So you call them icky, right?
Yeah, it was just called
come
ick.
from, icky.
It was just called ick. Yeah, yeah. And the thing is that I used a pesticide that was very, very high tech at the time. It was copper pennies. You would calculate.
You put them in the bottom of the tank.
You would just put copper pennies in the bottom of your tank, so many per gallon of water in the tank, and the copper would leach into the water and kill the ick. It was safe for the fish. Cool. It killed the ick, and so copper is a pesticide. That's why they used to put copper sheets on wooden-hulled boats, because copper is toxic to most marine organisms that would latch onto the ship, barnacles, wood borers, things like that. Now you can't do that with steel-hulled boats, because then you get an electrolytic reaction between the copper and the steel, and you'll corrode the steel, which wouldn't be good. But even in aquaponics, you will need pesticides still because fish get diseases. And you can make them organic and then just try to use really good hygiene to keep your tanks clean. That is harder, but not impossible.
Yeah. Well, there must be technology on that. Because you know, I mean, the thing about it is people who do aquaponics, there's a certain cut of people. It's not people who are in there to make a lot of money. It's people who are in there to save the world, and they want to do it right. They want to do it organically to the maximum extent. On the other hand, they got to keep the fish alive.
Sure, they got to keep the fish alive,
and so they'll do what it takes. But it wouldn't be their first choice for sure.
Yeah, I know a fellow named Glenn. I can't remember Glenn's last name.
Martinez.
Yeah.
Martinez.
He has aquaponics farm up in Waimanalo, where he's got fish in tanks, and the tanks circulate the water down to where he's got some algae growing, and water down to where he's got some plants growing that circulates back up. So the plants clean the water, and it circulates back up to the fish, and the fish fertilize the water, and the plants grow, and it's a virtuous cycle. And he goes all over the world teaching people how to do this.
The important thing about that, I mean, as you describe it, is that it's a closed system as far as the water is concerned.
Right.
So you can have a lot of water in there, but you don't have to put any more in because it just keeps circulating.
Except for evaporation.
So, right, but which is minimal.
Right.
But I mean, this is going to be, it's important now, but it's going to be much more important going forward when water becomes a precious commodity. It's coming soon.
Yeah. Already in California, agriculture uses the lion's share of the water. It's not in the cities. And with the water shortages that are coming due to global climate change, and they may get some relief this year because it's going to be an El Nino year and they'll get more rain, which of course means we'll get more hurricanes. It's a good news, bad news story. So we'll get cheaper food from California, but we may not get it here because the hurricanes have wiped out the harbor.
The good news and the bad news.
Yeah. So so you will have to have pesticides. A closed system's important, but you could still get pathogens in there even.
Sure.
And so we'll still need pesticides. And then the question is, how do we?
You know what they're doing now? This is interesting because who knows where it's going to go, but they're building what do you call it? Greenhouses. Before in the early days of aquaponics, it was outside.
Right.
Tanks and what have you, and hoses and things like that. But now it's out. Now they're building these big greenhouses, and so the whole thing is shut inside. And I suppose they want the greenhouses for the sunlight. But if you take a page out of hydroponics and indoor farms where they don't use sunlight, they use LEDs, just like these.
Well,
we could do it right here.
For LEDs. Back they used to have to use incandescence and fluorescence, and it was very energy intensive. And the fluorescent didn't even have the right spectrum. So, So
anyway, what's going to happen ultimately? I mean, this is out of a spaceship movie. It's all science fiction. Is that you can make the food inside, without having exposure to the sun or even a greenhouse exposure to the sun, and you walk in there and harvest your stuff, put a little fish food in the fish, and maybe some pesticides to keep it clean. But otherwise, it's a machine that generates food. Now, if I was a million billion kind of investor guy, or like a Chinese magnate, I would say, Mike, we here in China don't do things small. We're not going to take 500 feet or 2,000 or feet or something. We're going to take millions of feet. We're going to put it in a building without windows. We're going to have on one side you bring in the fish food, on the other side you take out the product. We're going to ship that all over the world, and we're going to automate it completely. There will be very little labor in there.
All robotic tending of the animals and plants.
Robotics and computers and sensors and what have you. Everything controlled, including the atmospheric conditions controlled. And we can feed the world that way. That's what some guy's going to come up with pretty soon.
There's designs for it. There's green buildings where the design is a green wall where you grow plants on the sunny side of the building, and then the interior you can have your aquaponics, and then farther inside the people live. There's a lot of designs like that to integrate farming, agriculture with urban living space.
Yeah, but it's going to migrate inside. One of the things that came up in our discussion about the aquaponics is why not, the restaurants like local food, fish and produce and all. Why not just make an aquaponics room?
That'd be cool.
Inside.
You go pick your fish out that you want to eat.
Right. Well, I suppose you
I want that one.
For an extra charge, you get to walk back in the room. It's like picking your lobster.
Or picking your rabbit at hopscotch. Anyway, this is ThinkTech. My name is Mike Dewert. The show is for the benefit of humankind, and we're talking about agriculture, pesticides, precautionary principles, and we'll be back shortly.
Aloha, I'm Nicole Horry for ThinkTech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone No. 9 has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBET, the Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone's mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Nicole Horry. Mahalo.
Aloha and welcome back. I'm Mike Dewert. This is ThinkTech Hawaii. The name of the show is For the Benefit of Humankind, and I'm talking with Jay today about aquaponics, agriculture, pesticides, precautionary principles, and we're getting kind of far afield, but it's been a very rousing discussion. So you don't want to pick your own rabbits, but maybe your own tilapia at the fish restaurant. Well, why not? Why not do agriculture and aquaculture inside?
Oh, I think that's what's coming. I want to tell you one other thing. And you get these days, you get email, so much garbage email. But in the garbage, is the needle in the haystack. And then one of these very interesting emails I got recently was these guys, and they want to come on the show, and I want to have them on the show so we can talk about this. Are selling high-grade plastic stalk devices.
Okay.
I've seen this, and it has a hydroponic device inside which sprays a fine mist, and the roots come in these little holes, and the leafy part of the lettuce is outside. So imagine a tree maybe 8 feet high, high enough so you can get your hands on it, that's growing lettuce out of maybe 50 holes, and a watering system, and of course you can put the nutrients in, the watering system inside, and it's all very solid plastic. It's not going to dissolve and make you sick or anything, and you can do this inside. And they had a photograph in this website of dozens of them in a hothouse kind of affair, but it could just as easily be an LED room, right? Where these guys were growing a phenomenal amount of lettuce with using these plastic affairs. And I'm saying, if I was a real survivalist, that's exactly what I would do. It's very efficient. So I mean, I think it's coming, and it's like energy. Energy started out at the utility level, and we push energy out to everybody. Now it's not like that. Now you can, like for example, you buy PV, distributed generation, right? So there's the possibility that this technology is going to let us, distribute food, distributed food. Everybody makes his own. You could be your own farmer. It isn't like the 1850s, but it is a similarity.
Well, I hope not. I don't want to spend sunrise to sunset tending the plants and animals and scrapping a bare subsistence existence.
I think you'd be
in my
sitting
backyard.
at your desk and in your stock brokerage office, and your cell phone will beep and it'll say you need to push up the mist.
Right. More humidity for the strawberries,
Something like that.
I saw that in Arizona. They grew strawberries in Arizona, and they would do it in a greenhouse, and they would do it on these tall columns, and it was aquaponics. Strawberry roots were in a moist medium. Or hydroponics.
It's related,
hydroponics. They're in a moist medium, and strawberries hung outside, and the leaves are out in the sunlight, and they grew a lot of strawberries in a very small place. Of course, there in Arizona, the hard part was keeping the plants cool. So then that used a lot of water, because they would use evaporative cooling, what they call swamp coolers, to cool the plants there.
That if this could be done,
it can be done.
Done in Arizona, done if not in your back room or your backyard, then in some grocery store kind of affair. The grocery store becomes the farm, right there in the store. So the result is you don't have to put it in a truck and ship it across the country or fly it across the world. It's right there, saving all this carbon, all this fuel.
If they can make that cost effective, that would be just amazing.
And these are nice plants. I mean, we had a show with a guy named Kerry Kakazu. He's a biochemist, and he's with the Cancer Research Center. And he has in Kaka'ako, he has a hydroponics farm. And the lettuce that comes out of that is just beautiful. It's untouched. There's no soil on it because soil is not involved. There's no bugs on it. There's no schmutz of any kind. It's beautiful, like a picture-perfect lettuce.
That's beautiful.
And tastes good, by the way.
All right.
And you don't have to wash it so much.
Well, gee, now I want to convert my house to a hydroponics farm.
Well, it follows on the PV, doesn't it?
It's hard to underestimate the free sunlight, though. But what you could do with a building is put light pipes in, put little windows on the roof and pipe the light down to the plants wherever you need it.
Did we talk about that before? I remember talking about
I don't know if we did talk
recently.
about light pipes.
There was a guy out here a few years ago who was a young entrepreneur. From the South he came. And I guess he was trying to raise money. So he gave a presentation. Might have been at the Angels where I saw this. And it was a fantastic idea. It was done with mirrors.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like a joke, but it was done with mirrors. And you had this very shiny pipe. And so you had a sort of receptacle on the roof that reflected the light into the pipe. And then the pipe came in and it would feed back out to a receptacle inside the building. So the result is that for free, the light would come from outside, and during the day you had a well-lit room for no money at all.
Isn't that amazing?
Amazing.
Yeah.
This was not expensive stuff. I wonder what happened to it, though.
I don't know. Maybe it was too hard to use in a high-rise, because can you imagine trying to pipe light down 10, 12 stories?
Yeah, it's probably, the material was probably very expensive.
Yeah.
That's another great possibility. In Hawaii,
oh yeah,
it's a perfect solution.
Yeah.
That and open air, and
well, that's why UPS trucks have translucent roofs. The panels on top of UPS trucks aren't opaque metal. They let light in so that the driver during the day can see what they're doing inside the truck for the packages. I mean, it makes sense to use the natural light whenever you can, and this sounds like a great idea.
It is,
there's a market there for it, but I'm not sure how big the market is, because I see the ads for it in home remodeling magazines with the light pipes, but I haven't been in a place that has much in the way of light pipes.
They distinguished them. UPS, remember, they were the first ones to design this wireless computer affair that the driver could trace a package or report that a package had been delivered. They're ahead of the game. And they're doing the same thing on their, the same kind of tech-oriented thinking on their deliveries around the country with their aircraft.
So this is pretty exciting. This whole aquaponics and doing it indoors, and perhaps using light pipes to save yourself the energy. Although LEDs are making it much more cost-effective to use electricity. Occurs to me that maybe the pioneers in Hawaii will, if we ever legalize Pakalolo. Because now you can have an aquaponics farm where you have tilapia fertilizing the Pakalolo and the water going back to the tilapia. And then you can sell the tilapia as Tilapia Lolo. Charge a premium price for them as well as for the Pakalolo.
Mike, that's just crazy.
That was a joke, but you can see that there's all kinds of possibilities for the creative entrepreneur here.
The market's open. I mean, and this generation, the generation that hangs around in Kaka'ako, I mean, before they get thrown out, that generation, they're the kinds of, they could figure this out. And because it doesn't require a lot of investment to get in to do this. I mean, for example, Kerry Kakazu, it's one room. It's the size, maybe a little bigger than this studio. It's not very big. And he's doing high-tech stuff. And when he needs pieces and connections, and he goes down to Home Depot.
That's all it is. That's all it is. PVC pipe and elbows and a little bit of PVC glue. Now, of course, you got to make sure that there's going to be somebody who says, "Oh, but what about the PVC leaching into the water that the plants are in?" Then you've got to. Now back to the precautionary principles.
Is the standard for water delivery too, though.
I agree.
Would you rather have lead pipe, maybe?
No, well, I'd rather have copper pipe, and that would have the added benefit of killing the pathogens that are hurting the fish. So, but yeah.
So we can, the thing is, we can do this if we get our mind set. And it's not like we have to make $1 zillion investment to make this kind of thing happen. When aquaponics first came around, and it wasn't that many years ago, I think it was a subsistence farmer kind of mentality. But now, I mean, I saw a house that came with a system. It was part of the sale of the house. I mean, it's a new house, and they put in a system so the buyer could enjoy the aquaponic. I mean, I think it's coming. And more people, like PV, will understand the benefits and the sustainability, and they'll be able to hedge against increased prices.
Put the whole state on a sustainable course, which we really, really need. And it may require GMOs, but it can also benefit from this technology, new technologies as well.
We'll have to get on the same page, and I know there's not much left in the way of time here. We're about finished, but maybe another time we could talk about how we get on the same page as far as this is concerned, and this is concerned, and stop having arguments.
We got to start educating each other and understanding each other better, and stop fighting, because we're on an island, or a few islands here, and we're all alone out here in the middle of the Pacific if something goes wrong.
And when you're
world
busy
economy.
fighting, you don't do anything else.
Yeah, that's true. There's enough here to share, not enough here to fight over. So,
Amen to that.
all righty. So this has been ThinkTech for the benefit of humankind. I'm Mike Dewert. And next week I'll plan to be back with a guest who will talk to us about natural gas and what's going on with natural gas in Hawaii. And until then, hui hou.